This is a continuation of the broken gears in the differential. I received the gears from Dean, the axle gears, which is these, and then the pinion gears, which I already have mounted, so I can't show you those. But I assembled the unit on the axles and had it in the car, and I noticed that I had play in the axle. The play was, I'll swing it over to the rear end. The play was in this location. Let me see if I can get it focused. The play was right here. So what would happen is I could move this back and forth. And what I noticed was the thing that was really holding it in place was the calipers on the outside were acting as a stop, so the axle couldn't move too far. But that's not what calipers are supposed to do. They're not supposed to take end play. Now, let me show you what I discovered after looking at it and studying it for an hour, 2 hours. I'm going to assemble. I took the axle out of the car. You're looking at the old axle. I happen to have the old axle, and I'm comparing to the new one. So this is the new axle here, and I'll show you the differences. Now, between the old and new, this portion of the axle is identical. I'll try to line them up. I did mic these, and I know it's a little offset, but if I move it, okay. These dimensions from here to here are identical on both axles. This is the old one that got replaced because they had a problem with axles breaking. But I did happen to save it, and I'm glad I did because I see differences already. I never had a problem with end play with that axle, and it was replaced because the Steam Traction World, or actually it was Model Works, sent out new axles because they were having axle failures. And you'll see that on some very early posts. So what I did was I assembled this this was in the car, and I assembled it. And the assembly is this bearing goes on first, like that, and then you're supposed to use spacing washers, and the spacing washers go on here like so, and as many as you need, spacing washers. I'll put another one on. Let me clean it. Put another one on. And then this is the bearing for the differential that rests on that. This is the outer. This section here is the outer section that gets clamped between the two halves of the differential. This is the inner section that actually goes on the axle and rotates with the axle. So you get it's a bearing surface between these two. So you're supposed to slide this on the assembly, and I'll do that. And okay, so now the axle's in the car. And you're supposed to tighten the axle nuts up on the outside of the wheels, and it draws everything up. Just like a standard front of a car, not front wheel drive, but the old days when it was rear wheel drive, the front wheels, you had tapered bearings. And you would tighten the nut up until the until you had a feel for it. You would spin the tire, tighten it up a little bit, and keep on going until the tire didn't have any play, but it wasn't too tight, and that's how you adjusted the tapered bearings on the front of a car. And it's very similar to this: two tapered bearings, one at each end, one at this end, one at the other end. And you're supposed to tighten the wheel nut up, and it draws the axles in. But what I've noticed now, these shims here, now you can see there's space between the shims, because the shim's sitting on this little lip here, and the bearing, so the bearing can move back and forth. And that bothers me because when I had everything tight, you know, they gave us shims to take the play out. The shims sit on this ridge right here. You can see the ridge. And that doesn't take the play out. The only thing it does, those shims do, is just move this bearing further to the end of the shaft. That's all it does. So when I assembled everything and checked for play, I found that I had quite a bit of play. And I probably had, I'd say, almost a 1/4 inch of play, no matter no matter how many shims I put in, because it was in the car, so I couldn't see what was going on. No matter how many shims I put in, I couldn't get rid of the play, because the only thing I'm doing, I'm stacking up shims here, and it's hitting that lip, so the only thing the shims do is push this assembly further into the differential. So I tightened everything down, and then I would check for play, and I still had play, and that's because of that there's that much space. So then I pulled out the old axle, which is this one, and I'm trying to see the differences between the old and the new. So let me put them side by side. So I pulled out the old axles, and thank God I saved them. I'm trying to figure out why there's a problem. So I'm going to slide down to the other end of the axles, and this is where the other bearing goes that's on the outside hub. And if you notice, right there, there's the bearing that slides on the axle. This is the new axle right here. This bearing slides on the axle, and it engages with the other half of the race, which is in the tube, in the stern tube, or in the stern axle, the back axle, and it engages in the race. And you're supposed to tighten, let me slide it down, you're supposed to tighten the wheel nut, and it drives the whole assembly that way and engages this tapered bearing into the race, and that's how you tighten it up. And you're supposed to turn it until it's got some resistance, but not much, and that's as tight as you're supposed to go. So I noticed that. So then when I couldn't figure out whatever I was doing, I couldn't get rid of the play, I pulled the old axles out. Thank God I saved them. And what I'm finding is on the old axles, this doesn't go on very well because it's a little corroded, but as you can see, I'll line the two up at the other end, and you can see there's a difference. I'll point it out to you. There's a difference between this edge here and this edge. So no matter how tight I put this nut at the end to hold the wheel on, I can't, once the bearing hits this, I can't pull the axle any tighter in from the center differential. So I can't take the play out. That play you saw at the other end, I can't remove it. And I couldn't figure out why. And then I pulled the old axles out, and I'm looking at them, and I see there's a difference right here. And I did measure the difference. I have it on the dial indicator. Let me bring it up. And there's the difference between the two axles. Look, I hit it. 327 it was. Oh, hold on, I'm going to get it. Okay. There's a difference. Hey, Hal, between the two axles.